If you say anything, someone would hate. People not liking your content is going to be something that stops you, then I would just say do not begin the content yet.
Timothy Armoo,
an entrepreneur who has recently sold his business
tens of millions of pounds.
To me, I think having an audience in 2024 and going forward, it's like bringing a gun to a knife fight. If you're thinking about creating content on social, I would think about how you can be more of a curator rather than an actual creator. That's where things are actually doing well now.
Well, how do they blow up? What mistakes are they making?
There are probably three main mistakes I think people make with content. One is that they just give up very, very early. What you're doing is you are learning the skill of just how to create. The second one is actually, and then the third thing, ironically, is
what do you think of Andrew Tate?
This guy's trying to get me cancelled.
I'm excited to host this live episode of the podcast today with Timothy Armoo, who goes by Timo. Now, quick intro. When Timo was 21 years old, most of you guys, including myself, were probably just getting drunk all the time, okay? Timo was setting up an influencer marketing company, which he built up over a couple of years to 75 people, and then he sold the business for 8 figures, making him a millionaire by the age of 27. It's pretty cool, right? Come on, that's pretty cool. Okay. All right. It's a super inspiring story. Many of you have probably heard it already, but he went from a council estate to inspiring millions of people across social media. So when it comes to building a brand, trying to get a community, an audience, there is basically nobody better to speak to on this subject. So without any more delay, let's give a massive, massive round of applause for my friend, Timo. Okay, I've massively bigged you up, man, so you cannot disappoint right now.
Do I ever disappoint?
We'll find out. Okay, all right. So, how are you? You good?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Life is great. That's my common refrain. Anytime someone asks me how am I doing, I always say life is great. Even when it sucks. Because then if you say life is great, your brain goes, oh yeah, it is great. Even when it sucks. So try that. That's a good hack.
All right, let's start with LinkedIn, okay, where you have 100,000 followers, which is pretty cool. Show of hands in the audience, who is posting content on LinkedIn? Who's creating stuff? All right, so probably like 80% of the room or something, okay? So, Timo, nice and easy. You are very popular on LinkedIn. You've posted stuff which has got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of likes, comments, shares. That's brought you lots of business. I'm keen to explore how you've built a company off the back of that and a really well respected personal brand. But let's just start with your thoughts on LinkedIn. What advice would you give to people that are looking to build an audience on that specific business platform?
So the first thing would probably be that don't think of it as a business platform. Because increasingly people make jokes about the fact that LinkedIn is becoming Facebook. And it kind of is, because now people are just posting about their personal lives on it. The big mistake I probably made was actually trying to be too businessy on LinkedIn. And also trying to, what's the best way to say this? So if I was doing LinkedIn again now, what I would actually do would be to come up with a bit of a split, like a 70-30 split. So 70% of the content would actually not be my own genuine original thoughts. Here's the reason why. It is because LinkedIn is one of those platforms where if something already does well, it will just keep doing well. And I think at the beginning, people grow slowly because they try and be too special. And then the other 30% is where then you'd add in your own element of uniqueness. And it's very interesting when you think about all these platforms, something that has done well 3 months ago, you can take that and then put your own spin on it, your own thoughts on it. Because there are only like a finite number of things that generally do well, like leadership, management, workplace behavior, entrepreneurship. And then by you then putting your spin on it, that's the way that you go broad. And then you add in the depth. So I think today, for example, a post we did was actually about when I got started in business, we were incredibly young and people were like, who the heck are you guys, right? That's going to build depth. In fact, on my LinkedIn, I think we currently have like 80 messages from people who are saying, wow, that really resonated with me. But the prior post yesterday was actually more around leadership and how to be a better manager. And what's interesting is like that piece of content there was something that we know has already worked. And then we then put our own spin on it. And that was a main inflection point for us. And an inflection point for me, which is you kind of want to be a curator, not a creator. Like you kind of want to be the type of person who synthesizes ideas and then puts them together with a very unique spin, rather than actually being the person with highly original ideas. I don't know how many of you guys, I guess we have some people from founders here. I don't know how many of you guys know about Scott Galloway, by show of hands, who knows? So he did this talk last week, and afterwards I was speaking to him about just business and stuff. And one of the things we're then Instagram DMing, which was hilarious. I was a fangirl. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, oh my God, he's DMing me. And what's interesting is he even has said quite a few times that actually a lot of his thoughts that his team come up with or that he comes up with, they aren't new. They're just produced in a way that is true to him, but they're just already existing thoughts. And so if you're thinking about creating content on social, I would think about how you can be more of a curator rather than an actual creator, because you tend to find that's where things are actually doing well now.
I mean, I was at the talk with Scott with you, and some of the things that he was saying, they're like decades, 100-year-old principles, but just repackaged, reworked, and curated into a new and exciting form, right?
Yeah.
What are the common mistakes that you see people make? Because people post all the time and they go, oh, it's not working. My mum liked it and that's about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, how do they blow up? You know, what mistakes are they making?
So there are probably three main mistakes I think people make with content. One is that they just give up very, very early. And I know you've all heard this before, right? Oh, like, don't give up, blah, 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 right? And sometimes you should give up, right? But in this case, you shouldn't. Because what you're doing is you are just learning the skill of just how to create. So I told a friend of mine, he'd posted for 2 weeks. He said, oh, no one's liking it. And I said, well, yeah, but that's because you also have 600 followers. And you from nowhere have just come and are just creating content. Of course, no one's going to resonate with it. Then he just kept doing it. And I think now he's on 30,000 after 6 months, because what he did was he just kept learning and learning. So my general suggestion, the first thing is don't quit too early. I tend to say maybe give it 60 days every day. You just post something and you iterate. So that's the first one. The second one is actually the first point that I made, which is don't try and be at the beginning. Do not try and be too original. And this sounds like sacrilege, right? Because I'm basically saying find what works and then put your own voice on it. This is if your whole idea is to get bigger on social. And then the third thing, ironically, is once you have the right cadence to make sure that you know what's worked and you're iterating, is then to have very clear, identifiable pillars, right? So when we were growing on LinkedIn, a big thing I said was, okay, well, what do I want to stand for? And I said, all right, I want to be the voice for the ambitious professional. And I literally got a whiteboard. I said, what does the ambitious professional face? Okay, well, they want to progress in their job, but for some reason they can't quite do it. Or they do a lot of great work, but they're not recognized. Okay, well, how do we create content to fit that person? And that has been probably the biggest thing in terms of just building true depth. And the most important thing as well with personal brand stuff is like, you have to avoid playing the follower game. I got sucked into that last year. I was like, man, I think I set the target. I said, right, LinkedIn, we want to grow 10,000 every single month. Instagram, 20,000 every single month. And I'd be sad if we got like 19,950 on Instagram. Like, oh man, this is the end. And you start to realize that there would always be someone bigger than you. Even like Mr. Beast, there are people who are bigger than him on other platforms. And so you have to almost think about it more from a depth perspective. So you almost remix content to bring in that breadth and then come up with your own unique insights using that 70-30 split to build that depth. And I've seen this happen over and over and over and over again, right? It's almost, whereas what people almost go is the other way. They go straight from the jump. I'm going to come up with stuff that is only unique to me. And the problem is, it's almost like shouting in an empty room. But what you do is you find existing and remixed content to bring the people into the room, and then you start talking about yourself, which is the best order to do it.
Hey, this podcast is brought to you by WeLoveAlpha.com. If you're looking to grow and hire and scale your software engineering team in the UK, then go to WeLoveAlpha.com to hire the best software developers on the market. Everything across Java to C# to PHP to Python to React and Angular and mobile and more. Go to WeLoveAlpha.com to hire the best software engineers in the UK now.
A lot of people in this audience, they are super stretched and super busy, right? And they realistically don't have a lot of time to be doing this stuff. So, look, you've built your own team to kind of run and work with you on your socials. Let's say, hypothetically, right, you got cancelled and you lost everything, all your followers, you're back to square one, back to zero. Yeah. I'm pretty sure you could get back to millions pretty quickly because it's about what you know and you've got the systems in place. Talk to me a little bit about the team for the people here that want to go on that journey, but they want to hire and build out a proper function to make it happen. Not just somebody in marketing that's working for them, but a proper dedicated unit. How would you hire? What would you hire for? What are you going? What's the plan?
So for people here, I'm keen to know how many of you feel like the constraint to building a personal brand is not having the time to do it, just by show of hands? Okay, interesting. And for those who didn't raise their hands, like, what else is the constraint? Is it, I guess, the kind of limiting beliefs or something? Like, do people care about what you're going to say?
Yeah, imposter syndrome, right?
Right, yeah. That, by the way, is a whole different thing. Specifically because, okay, so I know that you asked about the team, but I'll actually talk a bit about this mindset thing, right? Because I've been with a bunch of creators, and what I find very weird is every single person has that crippling thing of, oh my God, I don't know if this piece of content is going to do well. Why on earth are they actually following me? One of them is a famous YouTuber who constantly gets millions of views on his YouTube. And I remember I was with him and he was going to post the next day. And he said, oh man, I hope this passes 100,000. And I was like, look at your last 30 videos. Every single one has done 2 million views. Why are you even thinking about this, right? But to him, he still has that sense of, is this going to do well? Are people actively going to care? So I just say that point because I think for so many of us, we think the feeling of, is our work good enough, is unique to us. But that will be something that you will constantly feel until, Lord knows, like, it never actually stops. The other thing that you can always do also is you can tell yourself that at any point you can just stop. That was actually something, because during Fanbytes, I was kind of building up my personal brand a bit, but not super urgently. And I do remember thinking, okay, wow, I now have to start posting on Instagram. I now have to start posting on LinkedIn. And I did feel like, what happens if someone says, all right, what credibility do you have? I thought, well, A, I can just delete the comment, right? You can go. But then the second thing is I can also just stop. And if I stop creating content, no one else's life is gonna be changed. It's just gonna keep going on, because here's a scary truth. Like, you are not that important to anybody else's life, right? Even to your parents' life. That's deep, isn't it? But when you internalize that you're actually not that important to the stranger on LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok or whatever, then you realize that you should really lower the barrier. But in terms of team, so if I was to start again from scratch, so if I was to start again from scratch, I will hire for, actually no, let's say I had zero cash, right? Maybe a bit of cash, maybe like $2,000 in cash, right? I would go on Upwork and I would basically identify, say, 10 to 15 creators who I like their content. And I would go on Upwork and I would hire someone to basically say, hey, in the last 18 months, I want you to find the top 25 best posts from every single one of these creators. And then once I have that, what I would then do is I would spend a weekend looking at their best performing content, understand why it works, and then I would then see how can I put my own spin on it. Because as I've always said, I think 6 years ago, you really wanted to be like a social media creator. But as I said earlier, it's now just in the curation business. You can even see it in podcasts, right? Like the same people go on the same podcast. The same people talk about the same things. But it's just delivered in a slightly different way. So that would be what I would do. Now, let's say that I had a bit more money. I would hire for a researcher. And the role of that researcher will basically be to do the thing that I've just said, but then they also are then writing it. And then the next role I would hire for will be a script writer, because I cannot tell you the difference that a very good script, and by script doesn't just mean a video script. It can mean also your LinkedIn stuff, right? The hooks that you write, listicles, the frameworks that you actively use. If you have people who are very good at that, or you just learn it yourself, it is an absolute game changer. There is an inflection point where basically our growth was like this, and then it just went like this. And it was basically when we spent a lot more time thinking about the hook of every post, because we had someone in our Slack. We have someone called Serious Sally. Serious Sally is just a name that we made up. And Serious Sally is basically like someone doom scrolling through LinkedIn. And we're saying, what will stop Serious Sally? Like, what will make her go, oh, that's interesting. So if you go to some of our best performing posts, they've been like, if you are an ambitious professional, this is for you, right? Or one is like, here is why you're not getting what you want, even though you really feel like you deserve it. Something like that, right? And the whole idea is, right, Serious Sally's scrolling, she's scrolling, then she stops. So those would be the roles I'd hire for. At first, a researcher and then a script writer. If you're very short on budget, again, I'd go on Upwork, Fiverr, and I'd hire someone with the sole focus of that. Because what you want to do is build breadth, and then afterwards you can then start to build that depth. And the problem is too many people go the other way. They go like, I'm going to share my story. Okay, great. But like no one quite cares at the moment. So you need to bring them in to care. And then afterwards you do that. That'd be the way I build it.
Okay, that's cool. That's a bit different than what I expected. You know, most people, they go editors first, they go TikTok specialists first, but, you know, actually understand what do people want to see before you then spend all your time, all the energy, all the effort, all the money on actually creating it, right?
Yeah, 3 years ago, I think editing mattered. It doesn't anymore.
Yeah, it's all pretty simple.
Yeah. I think like it deeply mattered because what you were thinking about was how do I stand out? But now, the way you stand out is not in these flashy edits, etc. It's actually in the content that you're actively putting out. Recently, a video we made on Instagram, I think it's currently now like 1.2 million views. And basically, it is me writing on a notepad saying, here is how liquidation preferences work. And I think the hook was, my friend sold his company for 93 million and only made 800K. Like there are no fancy edits. But you see that, you go, whoa. What just happened? How did a man sell his company for 93 million, right? Because actually, we saw that the type of content people were interested in was the behind the scenes of the startup world. And so we said, right, now I'm going to put my spin on it, which is, I know a guy who did this. And rather than being like, here's how my friend sold his company, and then edit here, oh my God. It's like, well, no, this is how it works on a notepad. And people absolutely love this. So that comes by thinking about the research, not by having incredibly fancy edits.
Let's talk a little bit about like why we're doing this, right? Because you can build an amazing community, an amazing audience, but ultimately we're all builders, we're all entrepreneurs. We want to make money from this, right? We're not just doing it for the fun of it. So monetizing an audience, you've been able to do this really well. You've got an amazing book deal coming out. You get paid a lot to do speaking events. You have got brand collaborations. Tell me a little bit about like how to monetize the audience. You followed the advice. You've got a big community now. How do you make cash from this?
So how many of you guys want to like make cash directly from your audience? That's interesting. Okay. Because I don't think that at the beginning, and I still don't actually build an audience with the end goal of directly making money from them. To me, I think having an audience in 2024 and going forward is like bringing a gun to a knife fight. You just have any decision making you go in. If you want to fundraise, if you want to hire people, if you want to do anything, you have something to the table which absolutely changes the game. And I found that that has been one of the biggest benefits from it. And so when I think about building an audience, I'd almost think about it in two ways. The first way would be, well, how does this give me a competitive edge for the foreseeable future? And the foreseeable future is like 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? Because even though it seems like everyone now is creating content, we are so early, it's so scary, right? We're in a position now where just people still haven't quite caught on. And so if you feel like you are behind, you are not behind. I can categorically say this, you are not behind. So that's the first thing, right? Like sometimes just building an audience is important because the future you is going to benefit from anything that you do in the future. Now, in terms of the second part, how to monetize. So it's funny, right? Because beforehand, I run an influencer business and we basically help influencers monetize through brand collaborations. And it's only whilst getting into the creator game that I start to realize, wow, there are so many ways these guys are making money. So yes, there's the brand stuff, but then there's communities, right? Where people are doing paid communities. I was very surprised at the number of things that people would pay for if they're part of a paid community. Like I was stunned, right? And so that's one way. Speaking engagement is one way. For me, I haven't really monetized directly from my audience in terms of putting out courses or anything like that. The reason why is, quite frankly, I kind of have a stigma against courses. I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, right, let's sell courses. You know, then you end up being like a Grant Cardone or someone like that. You know, there are a lot of people who make more money from their courses than the thing that they claim that they actually do. Don't be those people. Those people are, they're vermin, they suck. So it's been, you know, speaking engagements has been useful. And of course, the book deal, right? So we have a book, a big book deal from Penguin that's going to be coming out next year. And yes, my personal brand and my audience played a role in that. It's very like a high 6-figure deal for someone who doesn't, I'm not like some person who went to war and came back and now tells a story. I'm just a dude who built a business and talk shit about it, right? And then they're like, oh, there you go. Here's money to do book. And that definitely comes from that. But I think the good thing, man, like, so the thing that's important is that there are so many ways to make money that you almost don't need to think about how you're going to make money. Because once you've built an audience and once you've built that trust, you can make money in so many different ways. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question. there's also actually, sorry, there's also, I'll tell this story very quickly. So one of the things I've been involved in is actually, is this completely being recorded? It is, right?
Yeah, man,
shit,
it's
okay.
everywhere. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
One of the things I've been involved in is what I call like alternative investing. It is investing in avocados, in lithium mines, and a whole range of random things. That came from my personal brand. That came because people saw the credibility that I brought to business, that I brought to topics, and they thought, right, this person knows what he's talking about. Let's involve him in this. Now, if at the beginning of personal brand, I thought, do you know what? Hey, I'm doing this so that I can then get involved in the avocado business. Absolutely no way. But the whole idea of it is that it increases. There's someone who has a very good phrase, which is that it increases your surface area of luck. And I find that to be a very good way to think about building a personal brand. You kind of have to just like be in the game, and people randomly know you for this, blah, blah, blah. And then they go, oh, right, this person can be good in this. So that's the way I think about monetization. Just build the audience first, because it's like bringing a gun to a knife fight. And once you have a gun to a knife fight, people want someone with a gun, not a knife, if they're going to war. There you go. That was a great analogy, wasn't it?
Cool, I love that one. Yeah. Let's do 10 minutes of a little bit more like rapid fire, and then we'll go to some questions from the audience, all right? All right. Short form content, all right? TikTok, Instagram, it's like taken over the world over the past 2 or 3 years. Who here is making like short form for their business or their brand? Instagram, TikTok? Yeah, so a few people, but much smaller than LinkedIn, right? You've got like 300,000 on Instagram or something, man. So you've really cracked that formula. What do you think of people that, I'm going to go controversial here, that really lean into the controversy and use that as a way to quickly blow up on short form? You know, people like Andrew Tate.
Wow, this guy's trying to get me cancelled. That's great. Look, so I think short form is just like a mechanism to grow, right? It's whether, and it doesn't really matter the person who uses it. It's just a mechanism to grow. One of the things I would say actually about short form is, I spoke about remixing content. Short form is one of those places where I find that not only does that help, but also coming up with like really good formats. So, and formats that are true to you. So if you go on my Instagram, you see quite a lot of stuff. It's just like interesting business books that I've read. And the first time I was creating, I was like, oh man, like, I don't think people will care that much about me talking about what I like about a book. And then it ended up that millions of people cared about it because it did became a repeatable format, to the extent where I had a few people message me who say, hey, my phone was buffering, but I could see in the first second there was this black dude holding a book, and I knew it was you, right? And the reason why I say that is because with short form, I do think it's very important that, is it going? Yeah. With short form, I do think it's very important that over time you own a specific type of format. So in the past, if you were building entrepreneurship content, you might just do what we call talking head videos, right? It might be like, here's how to do this, here's how to do that. A better way to do it would be to say, how do I own just like 2 particular formats that people would actually know me for? So there's a guy called Zach Pobroff or something. His whole thing is like being obsessed. And so anytime that you see the word obsessed, it's coming from Zach. That'd be what I do as short form. Whereas with written content, that's where I think it's perhaps more of like that 70-30 split. Whereas in short form, I think it's more like 50-50. It's like, okay, find someone else word remix and then come up with your own formats, because that's the way people are going to find you.
You mentioned written content then. You've got a great newsletter called Cheat Codes. Who writes a newsletter? Got a Substack? Got like a LinkedIn thing? No. Okay, one or 2 people. All right. Definitely an area where people should focus on. You do not own your LinkedIn. You do not own your Instagram. The only thing you really own is your email list, right? So get an email list, start getting them off social, start getting them onto your email list. Talk to me about building a newsletter. Most of the people, almost all the people don't have one. How would you start one? How would you grow it? Rapid fire.
Yeah. First things first, I would actually go against what you said. And I would I would actually really hone in on short form and get my formats right. And then what I would do is I would then use the short form as a way to then drive people into my newsletter. But I wouldn't just say, sign up for my newsletter. Like, that's such a weak CTA. I will come up with very specific lead magnets. So, for example, some of the stuff that's got us like tens of thousands of subscribers has been when we have said, all right, here is a video about middleman businesses, right? Where you make money from connecting people, right? If you now want a list of 54 middleman ideas, just comment middleman and I'll send it to you, right? And like, that is the way to grow any newsletter. But I would definitely focus on the social first. The reason why is because we have a window of opportunity where you can get a lot of engagement on social. And so take advantage of that and then convert them to newsletter.
Cool. All right, let's finish with looking into the future then. Show of hands, who believes personal branding is going to be more and more important for your business moving forward? Okay, now we got some hands. All right, so clearly a priority people should focus on. What are your thoughts on the future? You know, forget short form is what it is about right now. Before that, it was about, you know, I guess long form but what's the next thing? Like moving forward, what are you got like a little bit of your focus and attention on? What's going to take over the landscape moving forward?
So I don't think anything would take over the landscape, but I do think that there's a move towards just being a very niche authority. And so perhaps in, say, 2015, the end goal of being a creator or someone with an audience was actually like the size of your audience. So we spoke a lot about millions of subscribers, blah, blah, blah. But now actually the most important thing is because the bar to actually creating content is lower, the need for depth is higher. And so I would say to everyone, you actually shouldn't optimize for how do I even get 100,000 followers? I would go, if you have 20,000 people, screw that. If you had, say, 5,000 people, but they were like really people who hang on to the stuff that you said, they were people who really gravitated to you, you are so much further. You are like sickeningly so much further than people who just have a bunch of followers. I know you have to wrap up on this, but there's a very specific story. There is a girl I know on Instagram. She has 3 million followers. And she did a pop-up event. She had a clothing drop, some kind of thing. She was hyping it up. 3 million, right? 3 million. Guess how much she made from this clothing range that she had brought out in a week from the time that she dropped it? Just by a show of hands. Shout. Go on. Okay? 500,000, okay. She made $4,000. Why? Because, and I'm just gonna say this, because basically a bunch of her content was her in very skimpy clothing and basically being like, hey guys, I am doing fitness. This is me as a fitness girl. And she grew 3 million followers, but nobody cared about her. They just cared about what she looked like. And so when she had any item of clothing, it was like, well, I don't actually care about you. Just keep making videos, right? And it's terrible to say, but to her, she was an influencer. To everyone else who also saw her, she was an influencer because she had 3 million followers. And then you have this, guy. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy called Mini Katana, by show of hands. Okay. So he's this guy who basically does these katana swords. He doesn't have a massive audience. This guy makes like 12 million a year selling basically swords online, right? Because people love his content. It's small, but people love it. And I think the future of social is basically really going for that depth. And I get it. It can be so fucking frustrating when you're creating content and you see that your follow account is not the same as this other person's follow account, and then you go, oh shit, that means I'm failing. But the depth is what you're going for, and over time, that is what is going to win 100,000%.
Yeah, quality over quantity, results over vanity metrics. Absolutely, man. All right, questions, we'll take a couple. You got time?
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, How much time do we have? Because surely, if more people have questions, we can just keep going.
We got this.
All right, cool, sweet.
Yeah, so my question is there any natural progression of where to start with, like LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and is it a quick win anywhere where you feel?
LinkedIn. Forget YouTube.
So, but then LinkedIn normally with 100,000 is like equivalent to 3 million or 5 million in Instagram, isn't it?
No. So there are two things that aid where you start. Number one is how easy is it for you to get started? And then two, how early are we in the platform growth? How easy is it for you to get started on LinkedIn? You just write shit, right? And you can just write a lot of shit rather than I need to sit down, record a video. So there. Secondly, it's a lot more immature as a platform, which therefore means you can get more reach. Again, I would aim for I would aim for just like doing the reps of just creating the content. And the good thing about LinkedIn is you can just consistently create the content over and over. So I would start there. Do not, under any circumstances, my people, do not start on YouTube. Do not, under any circumstances, do this. The reason why, because it has its own kind of methods and algorithm, and it's also long form. It is so painfully difficult for you to get subscribers on YouTube. So painfully difficult. Even if you did shorts, etc., that's all changing. Start on LinkedIn, grow from there.
I mean, some people have gone from like 0 to millions on LinkedIn, like literally in the space of a year or two. So it's like the place to be right now, isn't it? Organic, well written, well published stuff. We're going to go over there. All right, to the back there. Fred? Yeah.
Hi, Timo. I was wondering, is it worth posting 7 days a week, including Saturday, Sunday, or only 5 days a week, or 6 days a week? Do you see any difference in number of followers or clicks on weekends, specifically Saturday, Sunday?
Are we talking about when you're beginning your content journey?
No, you could already have followers and you're posting every day, but like, do you recommend weekends to take it off, or to keep on posting on Sundays?
I think in an ideal world, you want to post every day. But the reason why you want to post every day is not like the number of days. It's just that the more shots that you take and the more content that you put out, the more data that you have. Historically, especially on LinkedIn, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Mondays to Thursday are always the best days, but that doesn't mean like just post on those days. Like post on all the other days. Ironically, Sundays at 10 a.m. does quite well on LinkedIn because, people are waking up from a long night. So yeah, 7 days a week, but not because there is some special thing that happens on those days. It is because you're just trying to keep getting the reps in.
There are a lot of AI tools out there
Yeah.
for producing content and generating content. Have you used them? Do you recommend any of them?
We don't use any AI tools. Well, actually, no. There is one tool. I don't know if it's AI. Who fucking knows what now, right? People just chuck in AI and then there you go. There is a tool. If we're talking about LinkedIn, there's a tool called Clio, which basically is as KLEO. It's basically if you go on someone's profile, it can tell you their best performing posts. And then you can understand, okay, what has worked for them. There's also a separate tool to check out called Taplio. Taplio is all right, to be honest, but I think Clio is better. And then on Twitter, if you wanted to grow, there's a tool called Tweetmex, TWEETMEX. The whole point of it, again, is just to like surface the best performing content. But apart from that, no. I mean, people now be using ChatGPT to like comment on my stuff. I'm just like, what are you doing? It's like some random person. It's like, this was a very insightful post. It really goes to the crux. Like, what are you doing? You look like a loser, right? So don't do that.
Okay, so I think like part of the question that I wanted to ask was already asked here, since AI is my day job. But the other part of the question, do you think when it comes to like more organic reach or like generating more reach, do you think like AI is going to affect that either positively or negatively, like moving forward?
So to me, the function of AI in content generation is just to amplify any content that you have. So for example, you might feed it existing content that you know has worked because you've written it, and then you might say, all right, can you create 5 to 10 versions which are similar to this? However, you then need to actually then go in and change stuff up. We don't do that though. Maybe we're missing a trick, but it's just because, again, like, I'm not in the game of let's get to 10 million followers. I'm in the game of like building an army of people who, in my Instagram, I have a thing which says like, I am creating the content that I wish my 21-year-old self knew, right? And like, that's the game that I'm playing it. So any chat GPT, mid-journey bullshit, I'm just like, okay, well, nice. But then you end up being like that girl with 3 million followers who ain't making any money because she's just like a robot. Like, there's no depth, right? So
I don't even know if this is working, but my question was actually, if you have a profile that you were populating before and it's suddenly you got really busy or you just got imposter syndrome or whatever the case is and you let it die, do you or would you start a new one or actually pick that one back up?
Oh,
but you had a following that was somewhat devout, but not.
I would pick that back up. I do believe that people don't remember you as much as people think. And so if you just pick that back up again and you are consistent with a specific type of format that worked, then you'll get back to it. The worst thing, I've seen this so many times, and it's just like, it's the most moronic thing you could possibly do, is that you create content and let's say it dies down for a bit, and then you come back and create different content. The people who follow you at the beginning go, who the fuck are you? And why are you here? So what you want to do is consistently create the content that you were, and then once you've picked back up, then at that point, you can start to tailor into other things. But if you're just going from the jump, hey, I was creating whatever, I don't know, fitness content, and I went away, and now it's makeup. And now it's crypto. It's like, what are you doing, right? So that would be the very tactical advice on that.
Yeah, I just have a question about that. All viral video have a lot of haters, like the people who hate you, the people who write a lot of bad comments to you. How you can go through this, and how you can deal with this, because it's really hard, I think, in social media.
I mean, just remember, they all die at some point. No. No, I mean, look, like, if you say anything which is, like, if you say anything, someone would hate. Like, literally, if you say anything. We have people who believe that the earth is flat. Bruh, it's kind of like, if you say anything of substance, you would have people who would love it and you have people who hate it. And if people not liking your content is going to be something that stops you, then I would just, in my humble opinion, I would just say, just do not begin the content journey. Because all you're doing is taking your thoughts and maximizing them. And I'm sure even in your daily life with no audience, there are people who still disagree with you. So now imagine if 1,000 people hear it, and then imagine if 10,000 people hear it, right? So you kind of just have to be comfortable with that because it just comes with the price of the game.
Okay, we got one over here.
Yeah, thanks for the insightful comments. I had a question kind of more around social media in general. So if you think of it as a bell curve, I think you was mentioning in the start or the onset that you feel that they were quite early in in its evolution. But if it was, I think some people it's getting quite saturated as well. And with any kind of new format, you reach a saturation point where people become not so much disenfranchised, but it loses effectiveness.
Yeah.
And then you've got other kind of external factors that is also influencing it. So say, for example, people seeing the negative impacts of social media and then legislation or governments waking up to the impact on young people. Yeah. And that will change inadvertently change the landscape for people that might be trying to use it for positive things. But because of those negative influences, it will change the landscape for kind of everybody. So that bell curve, where are we on it? And if we reach a saturation point and then it kind of tails off, what comes after it? Or what would you then do to kind of build growth, build value in a company if, say, for example, there wasn't social media or whatever comes after it, if that makes sense? I know it's kind of quite a convoluted question, but hopefully it made some sense.
Yeah. So I think that social media is just the current state of the internet. And if you believe that to be true, social media is not going anywhere, right? Because the internet is not going anywhere. So I don't believe there is a world where that happens. Now, let's assume there was a world that happens. I believe there will be another way for people, for the everyday person, to be able to publish their thoughts. Because remember, before social media, there were blogs, right? It was just another way for people to publish their thoughts. So if you imagine building an audience, building a personal brand, building anything, it's just another way of saying, I'm using this platform to publish my thoughts. Then really, the aim of the game is don't necessarily care about like what's the latest hack on Instagram, blah, blah. It's just, this is currently the way to do it. Therefore, I'm going to learn it. I don't think there's going to be any danger actually of, TikTok is apparently going to be banned. It's not. I know it's not going to be banned. And even if it was, cool, then we have LinkedIn, then we have Instagram. It will just always be there.
Afternoon. I'm not going to speak for everyone, I'll speak for myself. At my level on LinkedIn, you'll start from the ground level in the sense that I'm the one that's making the post. I'm doing the writing at every stage I'm involved.
Yeah.
When it comes to someone at your stage, for example, that has 6-figure followings and a whole process and means behind it, how involved are you in that process currently?
Yeah.
With regards to that fun LinkedIn post that we see, how involved are you in that?
So I would actually, two things. First of all, when I was starting out, what I would do, the number one thing that I did was I batched out the different parts of the process and I just dedicated specific periods to that. So let's say LinkedIn. There are a few parts to it. Number one, research. Number two, write the first draft. Number three, write the second draft. And number four, publish. What I would do at the beginning was I would dedicate specific, 2 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Wednesday, blah, blah, to just do those things, which therefore meant that I ended up not actually spending a lot of time on it. Now, in terms of how I'm currently involved, so my team involves 4 people. I'm quite involved from an ideation perspective on new formats because at the size that we're at now, actually, the thing that matters is not so much now just that 70% of just like finding what's work, tweaking, because now my team knows my voice well. But it's like, hey, we want to try a new format. For example, let's say on Instagram, we have this format that I saw work well, and I thought we should try this, where it's basically, here's a business idea. Here's how I'd start it with £100, £1,000, and £10,000, right? I don't expect my team to come up with that idea. I just expect them to like do the stuff that already worked. And then I iterate on that. However, at the beginning, with me doing everything, the best thing that I did was basically time block each part of the process and then just executed on that. Because then it's not overwhelming, man. Like so many people, it's like, oh man, I got to create 10 videos. And then it's like, okay, now I got to write the videos. And then you're like, at the end of the day, you then realize, oh man, I've only done 2 videos. Then you feel depressed because you've only done 2 videos. Whereas if you just break it down into different days and different sections, it just becomes a machine for you.
Okay, we have time for only a couple more questions. So this one.
Hello. So you talked about some tools like Clio and Taplio and then putting your own spin on things. How does this work with, I guess, taking inspiration from other creators' ideas? Like, do you have to credit them? And have you ever had any beef with creators in the past where you might have leaned too heavily on their ideas at all?
No. So I think the key thing, especially at the beginning, is to make sure that you credit the people that have obviously influenced. But the funny thing is they've also got that idea from someone else. So you have this like very bizarre mill of, Jay copied Harry and Harry copied Sarah and Sarah copied this, etc. As long as you give credit, it's fine. I've never had any issues with that. Because the people who are also big into social media, they get that it is a remixing game. By the way, before we get to the next few questions, I hope the fact that I have made it very tactical and very clear that actually you almost don't need to be a genius to do this, is the one takeaway that you take from this. Like, some people are like, oh my God, like you've grown your audience, you have this thing. It's like, yeah, but I also just kind of looked at what worked and then I built systems around it and then, ta-da, who knew? right? So you generally don't have to be a genius for this game. You just have to be consistent and learn on the way.
I'll get up just so you see what I'm saying. I'm gonna throw a little loophole because who doesn't like a loophole? And I'm gonna ask you like a 2-part question. Sorry to throw you off with potentially being the last question. So the first one is, well, one's a bit more practical and the other one's a bit more opinion on what you think. So you can answer in any order. The first one is, I know you were touching on how you can outsource it, and it was mentioned over here as well. Something that could be overwhelming, or at least I find it overwhelming, is the idea of there's people out there who might be doing something similar who have just more dedicated resource to it. And then that can be almost intimidating, like, okay, I'm generating really good content, but I'm spending ages on it. I would like to put more money towards outsourcing some bits once I figured out the strategy and all that, but I don't really know how much to put where I think that I can genuinely get that back. I.e., if I put 1,000, will I really get that back? Or have I just outsourced it when someone else can put 5K that I can't ever match? How do you balance like knowing how much to put towards certain things when there's a competitor who just has a better advantage in that space? That's part one. Part two is, what's your opinion on tools like Buffer and Later and stuff? Like, I feel like I've tried to use them, and I don't know if it's just coincidence or something, but I don't feel like I got the same engagement when I used those scheduling tools, or maybe I just didn't use them well. What do you think about those?
Okay, cool. So we'll start with the second one. Social platforms don't like when you use a lot of third-party tools because it's not authentic, right? And so I would generally, especially at the beginning, I would steer clear of those. Once you have, say, volume, then maybe you can do that. Because, yeah, there have been quite a few tests where you see posts uploaded directly and then posts via these third-party tools. And the third-party tools is not done as well. To your first question, it's an interesting one, right? Because I would say... Sorry, what's your name? Anad. Anad. I would say, Anad, that I think you need to realize that content is not a zero-sum game. So by that, I mean, the same person who follows a competitor can also follow you. And if you think about it in that way, like, sure, they may spend 5K and then they're growing, like they have, 100,000 followers, and you only have, say, 1,000 followers. But if you consistently do the work that is required to get to that 100,000 followers, the same person will follow both of you, right? That was definitely something that I think I had that challenge before, because when I started taking content quite serious, it was like, okay, well, my USP is that I've built, scaled, and sold a company, right? And I thought, all right, cool. Well, there's also someone in the US who is also like saying the same thing. And like, if they follow that person, does that mean they're not going to follow me? But it's kind of stupid, because if you think about your own content, I bet you watch a lot of people who are quite similar. And so if you think about it that way, why would someone not do the same? So I would say kind of get it out of your head that, oh no, I don't have as much resources, because they also at some point didn't. And also, it's not a zero-sum game. Like, the same person can watch you and also the other person, right? Most of this game, I know that we need to wrap up, but one of the things I would say, well, there's two things I'll say. The first one is, most of this game is actually a mindset game. It is saying it's fine to publish content. It's not weird to publish content. It is normal to publish content. And also, people are going to forget it anyway, right? Like, and then the second thing, and I said this to my team when we first started out, I would say, so in 3 months, we need to look back at the content we have now and be like, yo, that was shit. Like, that was so bad. And I remember talking to Cameron from my team, and he showed us a piece of content. It was like, that was shit, wasn't it? I was like, yeah, that was what I was saying at the beginning, right? Because at the beginning, when you don't know how to do something, it will be crap, right? And you just have to just go through the crap. And once you've done that, you realize everyone had to do that. So again, I really hope that the takeaway from this is you do not have to be a genius. You do not have to be some Super Saiyan who is born with the magical powers of content. You just have to understand what good content looks like, which the algorithm gives you, and then put in your own edge. And then over time, once you get good at it, you would literally start to have the muscle of coming up with ideas. And it sounds incredibly woo-woo, but sometimes I would just be walking down and I'd go, that's going to be a banger video, or that's going to be a banger post. But at the beginning, I did not know that at all. I had to like train my idea muscle.
Cool. Mate, that was amazing. That was a masterclass in branding, in LinkedIn, in short form, in everything to do with the future.
Hey, thanks for watching this podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, etc., etc. And I'll see you in the next episode.